Big corporations often get themselves in trouble with the government. When it comes to cars, these usually involve safety recalls or overly stretched accounting definitions. An automotive giant such as Mercedes rarely finds itself admitting to worldwide bribery of government officials. But in this case, that's precisely what happened, not to Mercedes, but its parent company, Daimler. This video is all about Daimler's admission in a US federal court that it bribed officials in 22 countries. Come with us as we use government press releases and news articles from the time to explore what led to Daimler's corruption and what happened as a result. Gottlieb Daimler and Wilhelm Maybach were Germans and are credited with developing the first internal combustion engine suitable for controllable road-based transportation. By 1885, they'd adjusted it into the standing format we call inline or straight today. The following year, 1886, Benz brought out the first commercial production of motor vehicles, internal combustion engines linked to wheels and a chassis. In 1926, Benz's company and Daimler Motorengesellschaft AG, the company set up by Daimler and Maybach, officially merged. The new company would be called Daimler-Benz AG. All future vehicles would go by a brand new name, Mercedes-Benz. Daimler-Benz AG went through several name changes. In 1998, it became Daimler-Chrysler after a merger with Chrysler. This became Daimler AG in 2007 after it sold most of its shares in Chrysler, and finally Mercedes-Benz Group AG in February 2022. It was this parent company responsible for the Mercedes and Smart brands that came under fire in 2010. Note that Daimler AG is entirely unrelated to the currently dormant British luxury brand, which also goes by the name Daimler, although they both trace their roots back to Gottlieb Daimler and Wilhelm Maybach. Why briefly run through the origins of Daimler? Because despite their humble roots as one of the founding fathers of today's cars, Daimler has hit several self-induced bumps in the road. One of the most notable became public knowledge on Thursday, April 1st, 2010. But this was no April Fool's prank. Daimler AG was charged under the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, or FCPA. The FCPA is an American law prohibiting the bribery of foreign officials to obtain or retain business. Furthermore, with the enactment of certain amendments in 1998, the anti-bribery provisions of the FCPA now also apply to foreign firms and persons who cause directly or through agents an act in furtherance of such a corrupt payment to take place within the territory of the United States. That is to say, it's illegal to bribe government officials of any country to promote business interests using any American financial account, even if the individual or company is an American. And this is key to how a German company came to be charged in an American court in the District of Columbia. As it would turn out, the allegations were both grave and true. In short, Daimler had been bribing officials in at least 22 countries in a decade-long scheme. One of the largest vehicle producers in the world was moving money around using international subsidiaries, shell companies, and US-based agents, among others. Daimler covertly sent money to corrupt government officials in these 22 countries, notably China, Russia, Iraq, and Croatia. These payments were usually deposited in shell companies with the understanding that the officials would dip into the finances for either their own personal use or to benefit their governments. Overall, the Department of Justice explains that Daimler bribed officials in 22 countries through a variety of mechanisms, including the use of corporate ledger accounts known internally as third-party accounts or TPAs, corporate cash desks, offshore bank accounts, deceptive pricing arrangements, and third-party intermediaries. Payments were referenced as commissions, special discounts, and or nützliche Aufwendungen or NA payments, which translates to useful payment or necessary payment, and was understood by certain Daimler employees to mean official bribe. The third-party agents, which we'll call TPAs throughout the rest of this video, were used and supervised by the most senior management of Daimler's sales organization, according to court papers. Daimler AG was charged along with 3 of its subsidiary companies. These were the Russian-based Daimler Chrysler Automotive Russia SAO, renamed to Mercedes-Benz Russia SAO, the German-based Export and Trade Finance GmbH, and the China-based Daimler Chrysler China Limited, known in 2010 as Daimler Northeast Asia Limited. Daimler AG and its subsidiaries traded on American stock exchanges and sent payments through agents and accounts based in the US. This made them liable to American law, including the FCPA. We'll explain what the US Department of Justice mentions as some of the most prominent corruption cases involving bribes sent to Chinese, Russian, Iraqi, and Croatian officials. DCCR sent Chinese officials bribes labeled as commissions, delegation travel, and gifts to facilitate vehicle sales. Daimler AG and DCAR admitted to actively wiring money to Russian government officials in accounts held in the US, Latvia, and other locations. Daimler AG directly illegally paid Iraqi officials to consolidate contracts for selling vehicles via the Oil for Food program, a breach of UN terms. And ETF sent money to Croatian officials, sometimes via accounts in the US, to ensure the sale of fire trucks. There were many similar cases in other countries, including Vietnam, Turkey, Turkmenistan, Egypt, Greece, Latvia, Nigeria, and more. Daimler AG, or one of its three mentioned subsidiaries, was also responsible for each of these cases. DCAR, ETF, and DCCL, the subsidiaries based in Russia, Germany, and China respectively, were each charged with one count of conspiracy to violate the anti-bribery provisions of the FCPA and one count of violating those provisions. Daimler AG, the parent company behind these subsidiaries, and the Mercedes-Benz brand itself had charges filed under one count of conspiracy to violate the books and records provisions of the FCPA and one count of violating those provisions. However, DCCL, along with Daimler AG itself, consented to a deferred prosecution agreement. In law, a deferred prosecution agreement comes when prosecutors agree to not charge the defendant in exchange for meeting certain conditions. These are usually financial compensation, and in cases like these, often involve an independent monitor for the next few years to ensure the company in question doesn't break those laws again. In contrast, Russian and German subsidiaries DCAR and ETF were directly charged under criminal law after pleading guilty. They had to pay $27.26 million and $29.12 million respectively, with Daimler AG and DCCL agreeing to a deferred prosecution agreement and DCAR and ETF being fined under criminal law. Daimler and its subsidiaries would pay the US government $93.6 million in criminal fines and penalties. At the same time, the US Securities and Exchange Commission, or the SEC, had entered a civil complaint related to the same investigations. The judge also ordered Daimler AG to pay an additional $91.4 million in disgorgement of profits relating to those violations. In total, therefore, breaking the FCPA would cost Daimler $185 million on top of legal fees, lost business, and potential damage to Mercedes and Smart's brand reputation. They would also be monitored by an independent office, former FBI Director Louis Freeh, for the next 3 years. Although the allegations make it sound like Daimler was corrupt from the top down, this wasn't really the case. Investigations concluded that Daimler's chief internal auditor, who remained unnamed throughout the American legal proceedings, had pushed the Daimler board to implement a new integrity code as far back as 1999. The board discussed this and agreed to put the policy in place. However, court documents signed by the Daimler legal team and American prosecutors reveal that at that time, Daimler maintained over 200 third-party accounts, or TPAs, and was aware of methods through which its employees, subsidiaries, and affiliates had regularly paid bribes to assist in securing business, and that Daimler failed to audit the TPAs or otherwise ensure bribery was abandoned. As a result, bribes continued to flow. Daimler ignored a memo in 2000 from its chief internal auditor to monitor the TPAs more closely, and sales chiefs firmly pushed back against his recommendation to shut all TPAs in 2001. By 2004, Daimler had reduced its TPAs to 40, down from about 200, but only fully closed all the accounts in 2005 once American investigators started looking into their finances. The investigations began in 2004 thanks to a former Chrysler auditor turned whistleblower, David Bazzetta, who informed the US Labor Department after learning in 2001 at an audit meeting in Stuttgart that bribing government officials was commonplace. He later won a lawsuit for unfair dismissal. In fact, with American investigators hot on the trail, Daimler Chrysler fired several employees in early 2006. An internal investigation had concluded certain individuals were responsible for making bribery payments that may have broken national and international law. Despite the closure of the TPAs and the firing of employees, a few bribery payments continued until January 2008. The integrity code was in place, but Daimler didn't reinforce it strictly enough. Some sales chiefs and leaders continued to bribe government officials throughout the world, and this worked in Daimler's favor, until they got caught, of course. Despite these criminal investigations, charges, and admissions, Mercedes survived and thrived in the North American market. Sales slumped slightly in 2008 and 2009 but rebounded strongly in 2011, seemingly completely unaffected by the international bribery scandal. US prosecutors believe these bribes totaled around 3 million euros for Chinese officials, 4.2 million euros for Russian officials, and more for those in other countries. It was estimated that these corrupt schemes benefited Daimler about $50 million spread across multiple years. In the grand scheme of things, this is a relatively low amount. For example, Daimler's 2011 report calculates an annual net profit across 2010 of 4.7 billion euros, with 2011 bringing in a remarkable 6 billion euros. That's profit, not revenue. However, this in no way undermines the severity of the crimes. The hefty fines and payments, totaling $185 million, far exceed the profit Daimler may have made from bribes. It would go a long way in dissuading any other companies who might opt to use the North American market as what the Department of Justice called a nexus for corrupt transactions. Thanks for watching this video with us. If you enjoyed this content, please leave a like and subscribe, not forgetting to click the notification bell. Let us know in the comments which automotive scandal we should cover next time. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week.